Let me tell you about the worst mistake the Vora Empire ever made. Not the siege of Cold Tara, where they lost 40 warships to a magnetic storm they absolutely should have seen coming. Not the Treaty of Bin Sol, where their diplomats accidentally signed away mineral rights to 3 moons because nobody bothered to learn the difference between lease in permanent surrender and standard galactic. Not even the time their Supreme Admiral declared war on a species that turned out to already be extinct, which honestly deserves its own historical archive. No, the worst mistake the Vora Empire ever made was a Tuesday afternoon on a transit station called Pillory 9, when a soldier named Ray Costs decided to backhand a small human child because she was standing too close most to the checkpoint line. Her name was Mara. She was 7 years old. She had a stuffed animal shaped like a blue dog, and her father was standing 6 meters away, watching the whole thing. His name was Callum Vos. I know what you were thinking. You were thinking, oh, another story about human rage. Another tale of the pink-skinned creatures and their laughable emotional responses. We had all heard these stories. Every species in the galactic congregate had heard these stories. They were entertainment. They were folklore. They were the kind of thing you told your hatchlings at night to make them laugh. Because surely the accounts were exaggerated. They were not exaggerated. I was there. My name is Zoo of Rakon, and I was a junior cultural observer assigned to Pillory 9 under the congregate's neutral monitoring program. I had a clipboard, a recording device, and approximately 0 combat training. I was there to document trade negotiations. I was not prepared for what I witnessed, and I have spent every rotation since trying to process it. So let me start from the beginning. Pillory 9 was not a glamorous station. It sat at the edge of Vorith-controlled space like a tooth that needed pulling. A rusted commercial hub with 17 docking bays, a market district that smelled like fermented grain and engine coolant, and a population of roughly 12,000 beings from 40 different species. Humans had been operating a small trade post there for about 6 standard years. They called their district Vos Corner, because, as it turned out, most of the humans there were either related to or employed by one Callum Vos, who had apparently decided that the edge of Vorith-controlled space was a perfectly reasonable place to build a family business. I had met Callum Vos twice before the incident. The first time was during a routine documentation visit, where he offered me something he called coffee, which I declined, and then he drank 3 cups of it himself while describing his supply chain logistics in more detail than I needed or wanted. He was, by most external measurements, unremarkable. Medium height for a human, somewhere in the age range they call mid-40s, with hair the color of storm clouds and eyes that were a very ordinary shade of brown. He spoke calmly. He smiled often. He had a habit of tilting his head slightly when he was listening, like he was filing away everything you said into some internal cabinet he might refer to later. The second time I met him, he was teaching his daughter how to play a board game, and she kept cheating, and he kept letting her. And when I asked him about it, he just shrugged and said, "She's 7, she's learning the game. There's no point winning against someone who does not know all the rules yet." I thought about that later. I thought about it a lot. The Vorith checkpoint on Pillory 9 had been a source of tension for months. The Empire had been slowly tightening its administrative grip on the station, which was their standard operating procedure before a formal annexation. First, you establish checkpoints. Then you establish curfews, then you establish a garrison. Then one morning you wake up and the station is not a neutral commercial hub anymore. It is a Vorith administrative outpost, and if you want to leave, you need 17 forms of documentation and a good reason. The checkpoint guards were not chosen for their customer service skills. Dragcosts, in particular, was a specimen of the Vorith military philosophy made flesh. He was large, even by Vorith standards, with the gray-green scaled hide of the northern breeding lines, and a facial structure that communicated approximately one emotion, which was contempt. He wore his rank badge with the specific pride of someone who knows he is small within a large institution and compensates by being as unpleasant as possible to anyone with less authority than himself.
On the afternoon in question, the checkpoint line was long. There had been a supply delivery that morning, and half the station seemed to be moving cargo through at once. The air was hot. The ventilation system on that level had been underperforming for 2 weeks because the Vora administrator had declined to approve the maintenance request. People were tired and irritable, and the line was moving slowly because Dracostes and his 2 subordinates were inspecting every container with the thoroughness of beings who had absolutely nowhere else to be. Mara Vos had gotten separated from the main Vos group by about 3 meters. Not far, not concerning. She was standing near the checkpoint barrier, holding her stuffed blue dog, watching the cargo inspections with the frank curiosity that human children apply to absolutely everything. She was not in the way. She was not touching anything. She was simply a small person standing in a space, existing in it with the uncomplicated confidence of someone who has not yet learned that the universe is full of beings who will decide her existence is inconvenient. Dracostes decided her existence was inconvenient. He did not warn her. He did not gesture for her to move. He did not look at her with the particular coldness of someone who is about to do something they will regret. He just turned mid-step and struck her across the face with the back of his hand. She fell. The stuffed blue dog flew 3 feet in the other direction. The entire checkpoint went silent. Not the comfortable silence of a pause in conversation, the crystallized, suspended silence of a room full of beings who have just seen something that rewrites the next several hours of their lives, whether they wanted to or not. Mara did not cry immediately. That was the part that stayed with me. She sat on the ground for 2 full seconds, hand pressed to her cheek, eyes wide, processing what had just happened with the delayed comprehension of a child whose brain is still catching up to her body's experience. Then she looked across the checkpoint line, and I turned to follow her gaze. Callum Vos had been standing at a cargo scanner 6 meters away, talking to a Vora customs official about a shipment of processed grain. He had a data pad in one hand. He had been relaxed in the way that experienced traders learn to be relaxed in tense situations, a deliberate looseness that keeps negotiations moving. He was not relaxed anymore. I want to be precise about what I saw, because I am a trained observer, and precision is my profession. He did not move immediately. That is the part that the accounts get wrong when they retell this story, and they do retell it across 12 star systems and counting. People say he charged. People say he screamed. People say he became something unrecognizable. None of that is accurate. What Callum Vos did in the 2 seconds after his daughter hit the floor was go very still. Not the stillness of shock, not the stillness of fear. A different kind. The stillness of a being who has made a decision so completely and so finally that there is no longer internal conflict requiring external expression. Every question had been asked and answered in the space between one breath and the next. The data pad in his hand lowered slowly. His eyes moved from Mara to Dracostes with a precision that I can only describe as targeting. And then he smiled. I have thought about that smile a long time. It was not angry. It was not threatening in any of the ways that a smile can be threatening. It was patient. It was the smile of someone who has just been told exactly what the rest of their day is going to look like, and decided that is fine. The customs official said something to him. I could not hear from my position. Callum did not respond to the official. He set the data pad down on the scanner counter with the careful deliberateness of someone who intends to pick it up again later, and he walked toward the checkpoint barrier. Dracostes had already turned back to his work. He had struck a child and turned back to his work with the casual dismissiveness of someone who considers the matter closed. He was looking at a manifest. He did not notice Callum Vos approaching, because Callum Vos was not approaching loudly or quickly or in any way that would register as a threat to someone who defines those threats by volume and speed. "Hey," Callum said. He said it the way you might say it to a friend who's spotted at a market. "Hey, here I am." Nothing alarming. Dracostes turned. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. I am not going to describe it in detail, partly because this is a record intended for congregate archives, and partly because I genuinely could not track all of it with my eyes. What I can tell you is that Dracosts weighed approximately 240 kilograms, that Vorath guards at checkpoints are armed with a standard sidearm, a contact baton, and a secondary blade. And at the end of those 4 seconds, none of those things were in Dracost's possession. And Dracosts was on the floor, and Callum Vos was standing over him, holding the contact baton with the loose-wristed grip of someone who has used one before. He was not breathing hard. He looked down at Dracosts the way you look at a task you have completed. Then he turned, walked back to where Mara was sitting, sat down on the floor beside her, and picked up the stuffed blue dog. He handed it to her. She took it. He put his arm around her, and he said something quiet that I could not hear, and she leaned into him, and he pressed his lips to the top of her head. The entire checkpoint was still watching. The 2 other Vorath guards were also still watching, which was interesting, because they had not moved to assist Dracosts, which told me something about the internal politics of that particular posting that I did not have time to analyze right now. What I did have time to notice was that